Hey there, and welcome to a brand new episode of Delivering Marketing Joy. I am your host, Kirby Hasseman, and joining me today, I'm so excited, first-time guest, rock star. He's the president of, and I love this, Promo SoapBox, the SoapBox, SoapBox Marketing and Communications. They like to go by the SoapBox. Dan Pigott, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, this is awesome, man. So I want to kind of jump in on this. You and Brett Schaefer decided to start this new company called the SoapBox during the middle of this pandemic, kind of a tough time. So talk about what the company is for those who don't know, and why did you decide to do it when you decided to do it?
Yeah, well, the real answer is necessity.
It's the way a lot of companies get started.
Yeah. So, I mean, when this pandemic broke, I was let go from my previous job.
Yep.
And I like to joke, and then you start to look around for what your next move is going to be. And I can now confirm that the first 3 weeks of a global pandemic are not a great time to look for a new job.
Fair.
So, but I started calling my network and calling around the industry. And in one of these conversations, a friend of mine who owns a supplier company said to me, Dan, this may be an opportunity to create something new, to redefine kind of how communication is done between suppliers and distributors, what with events being canceled and sales forces being let go and people working remotely. It just made it really, really hard for that communication piece to maintain at where it was.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of came up with this concept where basically what we've done is we've built a custom website platform that will host 20-minute brainstorming sessions on a one-on-one basis with executive team members from suppliers and top producing salespeople from distributorships all around the country. So we took sort of the most productive elements of some of those hosted buying event type of events.
Right.
And we had to extract those and then tweak them so they would work virtually. And I think one of the things that's worked the best for us is these format changes were very, very significant. And, that's, I think, really part of the success that we've had in the early going. So when I first had this idea, I knew I needed help. And I turned to my friend, Brett Schaefer, who has an operational background and plenty of it in this industry. And I said, that's the kind of guy I need because I'm more of a sales and marketing side of guy. And he's got this nice operational background. So the two of us put our heads down for the last 9 or 10 months and came up with this custom website. And we're off to the races now. We've had a couple events already under our belt.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. So I always say, as a person who has started several businesses, I think when you start an organization, when you start something from scratch, you have like hypothesis, and then you actually do it. So what are some things that you've learned in creating this platform that you weren't expecting, that surprised you, that maybe some things that went the way you thought and some things that didn't?
Yeah. Well, you're right. You need to be prepared to be unprepared is really what you need to be, because it's so true. Well, not only that, it wasn't like we were starting a business that I could model off an existing business and say, hey, I want to make these changes. We were creating it from scratch.
Right. So
it was different in that regard. And I think it was unique. And so what happened was, in all these conversations I had mentioned earlier, my gosh, suppliers, distributors, everybody, they love the idea and they're giving me ideas. Wow, it's a great idea. Do you think it could do this? I'm going, well, yeah, maybe we can. And so we implemented quite a bit from feedback from from the people we were talking with. And so that was a bit of a surprise in the process. We didn't think, we'd have that much input exactly, perhaps. One of the other interesting things I learned along the way, and it wasn't as much about building this business, but one of the more interesting things I did learn that surprised me, as you're asking, was how many people did well last year in 2020.
Yeah.
I don't know what the number is. My inclination is say about 25% of the people I talked to said they were setting records last year. So that was one of the surprises. And another thing that I learned is that I needed a partner.
Yeah.
And it's just been confirmed on almost a daily basis with Brett, believe me. And so that's been a great thing. But really, the last business I owned, I did it myself. In this one, I was pat on the back, smart enough to realize that I needed somebody, and he was there for me. So, And then the other thing that surprised me was that the universal positive reaction, which sounds like, a line of, what, but I was expecting, Kirby, that, I'd run into some speed bumps. I'd run into some people that said, that's not a great idea. What are you doing? You're not thinking. And it just wasn't like that. I kept hearing really positive things from it. And so there, I knew I was on the right track when that all started happening.
Well, I think to your supplier friend's point, I mean, I think sometimes in those moments where everything goes sideways, that is a time to rethink what you're doing and try and reimagine it. So, so one of the reasons that we're doing this interview now and we didn't do it a couple months ago, right, is that I think you wanted to get a few months of these under your belt. So I'm always curious, like, based on the technology, I mean, we've had a year sort of using technology like this. Have people been good at adopting it, both suppliers and distributors? How has that part been going?
Yep. I would say it's going pretty well. It is true that some people are a little more challenged than others, and that's just the way it's always going to be. But I think that now that, it's really become, for the most part, ubiquitous in this industry, this use of video conferencing. The one little speed bump we had was we created an online environment which had not existed before. And so when we're asking people to use our platform, they're used to the Zoom environment, maybe a Google Meet environment, or some of the other platforms that are out there. They're not so used to coming to promosoapbox.com, logging in and having everything work there. So there was a little bit of a learning curve there. I remember, our meetings all start right on that platform. You just click links that are already on the platform after you're logged in and you're in your meeting. But people were waiting to get some email from a supplier. Hey, how do we start this Zoom meeting? I don't have a link to anything. And so we had to re-explain certain things, but that's just because it's new, and it's new and it's different. But it's been going well. We hosted 372 meetings in our first event. We hosted about 330 this time around because, as you say, plan for the or prepare for the unprepared. We had that terrible storm in Texas, just kind of. So we had a couple suppliers couldn't log in. We had about 5 or 6 distributors that couldn't as well. But we managed and we've rescheduled all that. So, we're back up to speed, but it's been going really, really good. No complaints.
Yeah, it's funny. Going one place actually makes more sense intuitively, but because we've been trained to do it a different way, I can see where people would get sideways on it. So, cool, man. I'm glad it's going well. In the interest of transparency, I've attended several meetings and I've thought it was very, very good and very intuitive and been very productive. I think that's really the ultimate goal. So I appreciate you answering my 3 questions. I give everybody that chance, and I give everybody a chance to ask me a question. Do you have one for me?
Yes, I do. In fact, I do. So basically, what I marvel at, Kirby, when I see you is how prolific you are at creating content. I actually don't know how you do it, and that's my question: is how do you stay so consistent with your content creation, and what do you do when you don't have an idea but you have a deadline and something's due? That's really what I'm interested in.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. First of all, thank you. I really appreciate the kind words. I think that number one, I enjoy it. I really do enjoy creating content. I enjoy pushing publish. I enjoy the conversations, right? Like I started this as a content piece that, hopefully I was going to share platforms and I was going to expose my reach and all that stuff. And it's really become a masterclass for me on learning from other industry pros and marketers and authors and stuff like that. For me, the consistency is the key. I actually find that by setting up that schedule, it helps to keep me accountable. So, this is a Delivering Marketing Joy. I forget what number it's going to be, 320 some. But the reason once you start a streak, you don't want to break the streak. So I find that, we drop it every Wednesday. And if by Friday, I don't have something, I start to panic a little bit. And, but that, knowing the deadline is coming is actually helpful for me. I've actually thought about, and I had this conversation with somebody and they said, why don't you go every 2 weeks? And I said, if I go to every 2 weeks, I'll quit. I know myself well enough to know that I need that sort of consistency to keep me rolling. I think everybody's different, right? And so between if I don't have something that, hey, I have to do it at a certain time, I struggle. It's almost like, like racing, like running. Like if I don't have a race on the calendar of 5K, a 10K, a half marathon, whatever, I don't run. But if I have one, I create that sort of urgency. So for me,
do you have an unlimited well of ideas? That's really the thing that comes. I mean, I sit here, we're doing a little fledgling podcast ourselves, and I struggle with it, and we're only doing it every other week. But.
Yeah, no, it is hard. I would say the hardest thing for this piece is guests and questions, right? Because once I get going, then it's just fun. For the podcast I do with Bill Petrie, Promo Up Front, I spend a little more time coming up with topics there. But Bill, having a partner in crime, I'm sure you feel this way with Brett, that helps keep me motivated because I don't want to let Bill down for sure. And then, the blogging, which, that's the part where I spend the most time. I actually think it's the opposite, Dan. The more I write, the more ideas I have. I think I heard Seth say this to Dale Denham one time. Dale said, "How do you write every day?" And Seth said, "How do you talk every day?" Like it's a thing, it's a muscle that you flex, that you start looking at almost everything as an opportunity to write about or content or whatever. And I find that the more I do it, don't get me wrong, there are times where it dips off, but then there are some days where I'm like, oh, I could write about 5 things. And I think it's just, it's like kind of training your brain to look for it. If that makes any sense.
You don't want to disappoint Petrie. The wrath of Petrie is, please.
You are preaching to the choir, my friend.
Yeah, that's fine.
Well, thank you so much, Dan.
Hey,
I really appreciate it. And congrats on the start of something really cool. And we'll have to do this again sometime, okay?
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for being part of the Soapbox. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. That's going to wrap up this edition of Delivering Marketing Joy. We'll see you next time.